I sat in my favorite chair watching the world outside change. The summer warmth was giving way to the crisp, cool air of fall. My hands worked the knitting needles as they always did, weaving the yarn into something beautiful, just like the years of my life that had slowly, steadily come together. It wasn't that I was old, I was just wise, with stories etched in every wrinkle of my face. I knew people more than anyone could imagine. I could tell when they wanted to talk, when they wanted something. My children, Tatiana and Roman, had visited a few times, each time making the same promises. Mom, you deserve rest. Let us take care of everything for you. They thought I didn't see it, but I knew. I was old, but I wasn't blind. Everything began the day they came to me, clutching that old request I'd made years ago for a place in a retirement home. It was an idea I had, but it didn't feel right. Tatiana was always so busy, always caught up in the whirlwind of her life. But Roman, he was different. I sensed a change in him, a shift that unsettled me. I couldn't place it exactly, but something about the way he spoke felt off. Mom, we found the perfect place for you, he said. You'll be comfortable there. No more worrying. His words stung sharp, like a splinter I couldn't remove. I knew they were trying to push me into a corner, to take away what little control I had left. I wasn't going to let that happen. I had raised them, given everything I had, but now I could see their true intentions. They weren't concerned about me. They were after what I had left. I remembered all the times they'd called, only when they needed something, never just to ask how I was doing. Roman would talk about his business, how it was growing, but when I asked about his personal life, he quickly changed the subject. And Tatiana? She was always too busy, but her eyes would always linger a little too long on what I had in the bank. I wasn't a fool. I could see what they were up to. That day they brought me the papers, that packet of documents disguised as a solution. They had it all planned out, expecting me to just sign away my freedom, my independence. They even brought gifts, trips, home improvements. The familiar tactics. But I was smarter than they thought. I smiled and told them, I'll think about it. And I did. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. I had a plan, and it started that very day. First, I moved my finances around carefully, quietly. I transferred some funds into secure accounts, closed a few doors, and made sure that no matter what happened, they couldn't get their hands on it. I even stopped the automatic payments for bills, as if I had someone else to answer to. But I kept it to myself. Roman didn't know what I was doing, and neither did Tatiana. I could see the worry in Roman's eyes when I didn't bite at his concerns about my age. He would drop hints telling me how difficult it was going to be for me without them. I knew it was all part of the act, but I was no longer buying it. When they came by next, asking why I was so quiet, I looked them both in the eye and said, I'm just thinking. And that was the truth. I was thinking, planning. They had no idea that they had already lost. The days that followed were a game of quiet strategy. I kept my cards close, my lips sealed, while they assumed they had me cornered. Tatiana's probing questions about my investments were met with vague answers, and Roman's concerned glances didn't rattle me. They thought I was fading away, becoming irrelevant, but I was sharper than I had ever been. And when they thought I was ready to fall, I stood tall. My mind was clear, and my heart wasn't broken, only strengthened by the realization that I wasn't the helpless old woman they thought they could manipulate. The day they came back to check on me, asking what I had decided, I simply said, I'm still thinking. They had no idea how much I had already done. I wasn't going to let them take control, not without a fight. And even if they tried again, I would be ready. I smiled to myself as they left, knowing that the real power rested in my hands. No one was going to take that from me. I had lived a life, raised my children, and now I was taking control of my own fate. The first part of my plan was complete, but it was only the beginning. The weeks that followed felt like a chess match, and I could see that Tatiana and Roman were growing more nervous with each passing day. They had been watching me closely, and I could sense that their tactics were changing. At first it had been subtle. They would bring me flowers, ask about my health, promise to help with things around the house. But I wasn't fooled. Their eyes darted around the room, as if they were calculating, assessing the value of the things I owned. It was clear they weren't just concerned about my well-being. They wanted my place under the sun. They wanted my assets. They wanted control. And it was becoming painfully obvious. One evening, as I sat in my living room, watching the first snowflakes drift down outside, I received a text message from Alya. She said she was coming over tomorrow to bring me a new phone, something with new features, so I wouldn't fall behind on technology. It seemed like a sweet gesture at first. She even used extra flowery words, trying to mask the undertone of her message with kindness. But I could feel it. She wasn't offering me a new phone out of the goodness of her heart. No, she was after something. Her hands, just like before, were reaching for my finances through the screen of her phone. I knew what was coming. I had been ready for this moment. The next day, Alya arrived, not only with the phone but with documents in hand. She smiled, that same syrupy smile she had perfected over the years. "Mom," she said, her voice smooth, "we just want to make sure you're safe, that everything with your estate is in order." I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just concerned about my safety, she was after what was mine. The document she handed me was subtle, carefully worded. It was a change to my will, a way for her and Roman to stake their claim on my assets. But I wasn't as naive as they thought. Played my part. I signed the document, making it look like I had given in to their pressure. But inside I was already 2 steps ahead of them. The moment they left my house, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Within hours I had a new agreement in place. A document that ensured all of my assets were securely in my control, just as I had always intended. They thought they had me cornered, but they had underestimated me. The next day, Tatiana and Roman tried again, this time with a more direct approach. They invited me to a family dinner, telling me they wanted to discuss my move to a safer place and give more attention to my needs. They thought I would be eager to comply, to listen to their ideas, to fall into their plan. But this time I wasn't going to wait for them to walk through my door, ready to manipulate me with their lies. I had already taken precautions. The night before, I had made a call to the bank. My latest investment in stocks had yielded a return far greater than they could have imagined. I wasn't the frail, helpless woman they thought I was. I was sharper than ever. As they prepared their next trap, I had already changed my passwords and transferred part of my funds into a secure account. So when they arrived the next day, eager to pry into my financial affairs, I simply smiled. "I've already made the changes I needed to make," I said coolly. "And I don't need your advice anymore." Alya's face went pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and anger. Roman, ever the more controlled one, tried to mask his unease, but I could see the shock in his eyes. He had finally realized that their plan had failed. I met their gaze calmly, without a hint of fear. "I always knew you weren't here just to take care of me," I said softly. "I knew what you wanted all along." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in the doorway, bewildered and defeated. They had no idea what I had been doing. What they saw was just an old woman, frail and slow. But I had been playing this game for far longer than they realized. I had been planning my moves in secret, anticipating their every action, and now I was in control. I didn't need to play their game anymore. I didn't feel the need to explain myself further. They thought they could manipulate me, trick me into signing away my independence, but they had forgotten one thing. I was not as old and weak as they thought. My heart beat steadily, my mind was sharp, and I had a plan. They had played their hand, and now it was my turn. The calm that washed over me was not one of resignation, but of power. For once I wasn't the victim. I had been biding my time, waiting for the right moment to take back control of my life. And now that moment had arrived. Over the next few days, Tatiana and Roman didn't stop calling. Their voices became more urgent, more insistent. They tried to find me at home, but I was always busy with something important. A conversation with my lawyer, reviewing investment portfolios, contacting the bank. Each time they called, asking why I didn't want to meet or talk, I simply told them, "I only have time for important matters." I never told them that their so-called important matters no longer concerned me. It was strange at first, this newfound peace. I had lived without them for so long, but now it felt different. I truly felt independent for the first time in years. Every morning I woke up with a sense of control, a certainty that no matter what happened, I had the power to shape my own life. Gone were the sleepless nights when I worried about whether they were manipulating me. No more feeling like I was just an object of care to them. I realized that I had always been my own greatest support. That evening, after they had made their last attempt to visit, I took the final step. I opened new accounts and transferred a part of my savings to another firm. I knew they wouldn't expect this. They thought I had already been worn down, too fragile to resist. But they had underestimated me. They had no idea that I had been plotting this move for months, preparing every detail. The following morning, Alya called again, her voice sweeter than ever. I was done hiding behind my silence. It was time to face them. I took the phone, and instead of dancing around the conversation, I spoke directly. Alya, I said, my voice steady, you no longer have access to my finances. I've changed everything. You thought I wouldn't notice what you were trying to do, but I did. I saw the signs. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Now I'm in control of my life, and you won't take from me what I've worked for. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her scrambling for a response, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaking. Mom, you don't understand. We just want to support you. We're just trying to help. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. A soft, knowing smile. You don't need to help me, Alya. You want me to sign papers that would give you access to my money. But that's not going to happen. Without waiting for her reply, I ended the call, pressing the red button without hesitation. Tatiana called later that day. I didn't pick up. I didn't owe them any explanations, nor did I have the energy to listen to their justifications or apologies. They had lost everything they could possibly take from me, and I was ready to let them go forever. No more playing the role of mother, who was only there to be a resource for them. I was done. That same day, I went to the bank and opened a new account in my name. I wanted to ensure that nothing they could do would have any effect on my future. I wanted no ties to them, no leeway for them to weasel their way back into my life. Now there was nothing left for them to take. They had no control over me anymore. As I walked home, a strange sense of calm washed over me, as though I had just fought a battle and emerged victorious. This was the final decision, and I felt no hesitation, no doubt. I had become stronger than I had ever been. I was no longer just a mother or a daughter. I was a woman making her own choices, taking control of her destiny. I still knew they would try to reach out, to find a way to break through the walls I had put up. But I also knew that this time I was prepared. I wasn't just taking back my finances. I was reclaiming my power. They had believed that I was frail, that I was vulnerable. But I had shown them that their manipulation would no longer work. They had thought my kindness was a weakness. They had thought my wisdom was something they could exploit. But now they would see that my wisdom was my strength, and no one could manipulate it anymore. The road ahead would be mine to walk alone, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced the lies, the deception, and the manipulation, and I had come out on the other side stronger. And as for Tatiana and Roman, well, they would soon understand that my goodness was not a weakness, but a power that they could never control. I was free. The next day, as expected, Tatiana and Roman didn't give up. Their attempts to reach me intensified. They started sending me text messages, repeatedly asking about the documents I supposedly signed and what I planned to do with them. But I was prepared for this. This time they decided to up the ante, taking their game to a new level. Tatiana's calm voice came through the phone, trying to sound sincere, but I could hear the desperation. It was Roman who showed up at my doorstep that afternoon, his face wearing a strange calm, as though he already had a plan to get me to change my mind. There was something unsettling in his eyes, a look of calculated patience, like a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. "Mama," he started, his voice edged with concern, "we're really worried about you. You're not planning to leave us with nothing, are you?" He didn't even try to hide the manipulation in his words anymore. It was like a direct assault on my emotions, wrapped in the guise of concern. I stood there looking at him, feeling the weight of the years spent raising them, all the sacrifices I had made. But now, with the years of wisdom behind me, I no longer bought into their feigned love and concern. I knew better. I had seen it for what it was, their true desire to take everything for themselves, to control everything I had worked for. "I know exactly what you want, Roman," I said, my voice steady and calm, without a hint of anger or fear. "You want everything for yourselves. You want to take control of my property, my life. But that's not going to happen." His face darkened. The mask of concern dropped, revealing the frustration simmering underneath. For the first time I saw the true Roman, the one who thought he could manipulate me into submission. He thought I would crumble under the pressure, that I would waver, but he was wrong. He fell silent for a moment, trying to collect himself. His eyes searched mine for some trace of weakness, something that would make me reconsider. But I wasn't that woman anymore. He had no power over me. "Mom," he finally spoke, his voice more urgent now. "But this is your business, your property. You don't want to lose it all, do you?" His words had become less of a question and more of a desperate plea. He was trying to guilt me, to make me fear the idea of losing everything I had built. But I wasn't afraid anymore. "I haven't lost anything," I said calmly, my words cutting through the air with quiet confidence. "This is my life. And I've decided I won't let you or Alya use me anymore." He raised his hands in disbelief, but I stood taller than ever. For the first time in a long while I didn't feel afraid. I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted. I was in control now. I controlled my own destiny, and no one was going to take that from me. "Roman," I said, my voice firm but calm, "I've already made the changes I needed, and I won't let you or Alya tell me what to do anymore. If you want to send me letters, go ahead. But I won't listen to your lies anymore." I watched his face redden with frustration, and for a moment, I thought he might say something else, some final attempt to break my resolve. But he didn't. He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him with finality. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the realization that he understood. He knew deep down that he had lost. The game was over. I had won. And as he walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't the woman he had expected me to be. I wasn't the weak, confused old woman he thought could be easily manipulated. It was at that moment, standing alone in my house, that I truly felt free. I had taken back control of my life, and nothing could take that away from me. They could try all they wanted, but I knew I had already outsmarted them. The manipulation, the guilt trips, the subtle tricks, they had all failed. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had regained her independence, who had made her own choices, and who would no longer let anyone dictate her path. I looked in the mirror and saw not the frail woman they wanted me to be, but a strong, determined soul who had taken back everything she had worked for. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And if Tatiana and Roman thought they could turn the tide now, they were sorely mistaken. I was prepared. I had already won, and I would continue to do so. Because in the end, the one thing they couldn't take from me was my mind, my will, and my strength. And that was more than enough. From this point on, I was living for me. I was living for the woman I had become, stronger, wiser, and completely in control. And no one, not even my own children, would take that away from me. A few days later, I sat in my favorite chair again, sifting through old documents that I had been reviewing, when the phone rang once more. This time it was Alya. There was no longer the frantic manipulation in her voice, only a cold calmness. She even tried to sound peaceful. "Mama," she began, her tone softer than I had expected. "We understand what you really want. We won't bother you anymore." But I knew better. This wasn't the end. It was another trap, another attempt to reel me in. They weren't going to give up so easily. I listened to her without interrupting. She continued, "You've always been so strong and we respect that. But you have to understand, this isn't just about money, Mama. We want to help you and we're worried about you." There it was, just the last step in their game. She made it sound like they were finally seeing things my way, but the truth was they still wanted control. They thought they could mask their intentions with these sweet words, but I had seen through it all long ago. They believed I was too old and too soft to see their manipulation for what it was. They didn't know how many years I had spent learning to recognize their little tricks. "Alya," I said, my voice steady and calm, no trace of emotion. "You don't need to help me. I've already made my decisions. I don't want to be part of your plans anymore. I won't let you take what doesn't belong to you." I felt a strange sense of power as I spoke these words, a quiet strength that I hadn't fully realized I had until this moment. The weight of it settled into my chest like a warm breeze on a cool morning. Alya fell silent on the other end. It was clear she hadn't expected this response. I could almost hear the internal struggle in her voice, whether to push further, or to finally realize that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. She remained quiet for a moment, and I could feel her trying to come up with something else to say, But I didn't let her speak. You've already tried every trick in the book, I continued. But I see you for what you are now. I've made up my mind. You won't get away with this. Alya's voice faltered as she tried to gather her thoughts. But Mom, we just want what's best for you. We're family. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, Alya, you want what's best for yourselves. And that's not the same thing. I paused, letting her hear the finality in my words. I'm not the person I used to be. And I'm not someone you can manipulate any longer. There was another long silence. I knew she didn't know how to respond to that. There were no more excuses, no more pretending. She was out of words. I could feel her frustration, but it didn't touch me. I had already made my decision, and it was set in stone. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet and resigned. Okay, Mama. If that's how you feel. I didn't respond. I simply hung up, placing the phone down on the table in front of me. For a moment I just stared at it, as if it were just another object, no longer something that had power over me, no longer something that could be used against me. It was just a phone. A lifeless, simple thing. The feeling of freedom washed over me. I wasn't dependent on them anymore. I wasn't their pawn, their tool for achieving whatever they wanted. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. My decisions were mine alone, and that was more than enough. I knew Alya would try again. They would keep coming, finding new ways to manipulate me, trying to twist my emotions to make me doubt myself. But I was ready now. They could try all they wanted, but I wouldn't be their victim anymore. This was my life, my choices, and I would protect it at all costs. As I looked at the phone, I realized that nothing had control over me anymore. Not them, not anyone. I was free. And I was stronger than I had ever been. They could come again with their new offers, their promises, their lies, but I would stand my ground. They had underestimated me, and now they would learn that their manipulations no longer had any power over me. I was my own master now, and no one, not even my children, could take that from me. The days grew longer, but I no longer felt anxious. I lived my life as I always had, spending my days working in the garden, tending to the plants that had become my trusted companions, and at night, I would read books that allowed me to escape from reality. But even in my peace, I knew it wouldn't last. I knew they would come back. A week later, the phone rang again. It was Tatiana. His voice was slightly nervous, but he tried to conceal it. Mama, we're really concerned about your recent actions. You understand that we only want the best for you, don't you? There was too much carefulness in his tone. He was trying to convince me that everything I had done was wrong, that I was making a mistake. But I was no longer naive. Tatiana, I've already explained everything to you, I replied, my words calm, even cold. I noticed how he inhaled sharply on the other end, as if preparing for something more. If you really want the best for me, stop playing these games. They don't work anymore. His breath caught for a moment, and I could sense the confusion in his silence. This wasn't what he had expected. He had thought I would still be vulnerable, confused, willing to bend. But I wasn't. Mama, please listen. We just want you to be safe. You can't do everything alone, he insisted, trying to make his worry sound normal, like something a child would say out of concern. But I knew it was just another layer of manipulation. I can do everything on my own, Tatiana, I answered boldly. I've lived my life, learned to make my own decisions. And trust me, I don't need your advice when it comes to my property. That was the last thing I said before hanging up the phone. I knew he wouldn't call again. Not immediately, at least. But I also knew that this call was just another part of their game. 2 days later, Alya showed up at my doorstep without warning. She wasn't as confident as usual, though. There was something awkward about her demeanor. A subtle unease that I hadn't noticed before. I greeted her at the door with the same calm that I had always had. Mama, I don't understand why you're doing this, she said, her voice soft, as if trying to figure out whether I understood what they were trying to do for me. I looked her directly in the eyes and replied, because I understand more than you think. You can't use me, Alya. I'm not your tool, and my decisions are not yours to make. For a brief moment she fell silent. I saw her struggle to process my words, but she quickly regained her composure and whispered, but you can't leave all of this without us. You know we only want to support you. I raised my hand, stopping her before she could continue. I don't need your support when it's based on manipulation and lies. This isn't care, Alya. It's exploitation. Her eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly composed herself, straightening her posture. You don't know what you're doing, she said with a dismissive tone, turning away to leave. I stood there unmoved, not feeling any pain or fear. Everything had become clear. I was no longer part of their games, and they couldn't make me change my decision. Deep down I knew they would try to come back. But this time I was ready. I had seen through every attempt, every false expression of care. I had learned their tricks, and I would not fall for them again. I knew that this battle wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about my dignity, my right to have control over my own life. I was no longer their pawn. They had tried to strip me of my independence, but now I was reclaiming it. They had underestimated me, thinking I was just an old woman, vulnerable and easily swayed. What they didn't realize was that I had become something far more powerful, a strategist, a woman who had learned the art of patience and deception, a woman who now played her own game by her own rules. As I watched Alya leave, I felt no regret, no hesitation. I had done what I had to do. I had made my choices, and I would not back down. The game was mine to control, and no one, not even my own children, could take that away from me. I had taken my life back. I picked up the phone and set it down on the table, staring at it as though it were just an object. The power it once held over me, the way it had been used to manipulate me, was gone. Now it was just a phone, and I was no longer its captive. For the first time in years I felt free. I had regained what was rightfully mine, and no one could take it away. They could come back with their new promises, their schemes, and their manipulations, but I was prepared. I had learned from every past mistake, from every false promise they had given me. I had learned to trust myself, to trust my own strength. This time I was the one who held the cards, and I would not be moved. I was no longer just an old woman clinging to what little I had left. I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had learned the true meaning of independence. They would try again. I knew they would. But next time I would be ready. That evening I sat on the old wooden bench in the garden, watching the sunset. It was a calming sight, the sun slowly sinking behind the horizon, and the world around me filled with soft light. I could feel myself growing more peaceful with every glance at the tranquil world before me. In that moment I accepted everything that had happened to me. I finally understood that no manipulation would ever have power over me again. A few days later they came back. Tatiana and Roman showed up at my door together. They seemed a little tired, like people who had just realized they had lost the battle. Tatiana opened the door, stepping over the threshold first. Roman stood a little behind her, almost like he was waiting for a signal. But I knew deep down that nothing had changed. They had lost. Mama, we understand everything now, Roman said with a heavy sigh. You have a right to your decisions, and we were probably too stubborn. But his voice trailed off, and I could see the hesitation in his eyes. I studied them, taking a small pause. This was the moment when I could say everything I had been holding back. But I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. My independence was proof enough. It's good that you understand, but it's too late for apologies, I replied, my voice steady and calm, without raising it, but with absolute confidence in every word. Tatiana took a step toward me, trying to appear more pitiful than usual. Mama, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought we were doing all of this for your own good. I smiled without even feeling awkward. Tatiana, don't try to manipulate me anymore. Maybe you meant well, but your actions have shown that you're more interested in controlling my life than in letting me live it the way I want. They were silent. Tatiana and Roman stood in front of me, looking lost. They hadn't expected me to be this strong, this resolute. They thought their pleading, their care would always be my weak spot. But I had disappointed them. Mama, you can't leave all of this without us, Roman tried again. We're family. You're not my family anymore, I said coldly, and my words hit like a blow. I don't want you to use me anymore. I'm not just an old woman to be manipulated. I am alive, and I will live by my own rules. They didn't know what to say. Tatiana seemed to realize that nothing was going to change and simply lowered her head. Roman turned silently to the door and walked out. They left my house, and I knew this time it was final. I stood on the doorstep watching them leave. I no longer felt anxious, nor did I feel pain. For all those years I had lived in their shadow, believing that their words could help me, that they truly cared. Now I understood that their place in my life had long passed. The trials they had put me through had made me stronger, not weaker. That evening marked the beginning of my new life. I left the past behind without looking back, and I continued to move forward. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman who decided what she wanted to do. I freed myself from fear, from manipulation, and from those who wanted to control my life. From that moment on, I was the master of my own fate. The years I had spent under their control, believing that their love came with strings attached, had shaped me in ways I didn't understand until now. But those days were over. I no longer needed to rely on anyone else's definition of love, care, or responsibility. I had learned to trust myself, to listen to my own heart, and to take my life back in the only way that mattered, by making my own decisions. It wasn't easy to let go. For so long I had believed that I needed to take care of them, that my role was to give, to sacrifice. But now I saw it clearly. I had been sacrificing myself. In trying to hold on to them, I had let go of me. But no more. As the seasons changed, so did I. My garden flourished, and with it I did too. I planted seeds, not just in the soil but in my soul. I watched them grow, and each day that passed I felt more grounded. I had no regrets. Not anymore. For the first time in years, I woke up each day without fear, without a sense of obligation. I woke up knowing that I was enough, that I had always been enough. And as I sat on that bench watching the sunset, I understood that it wasn't just the sun setting on the day. It was the sunset of the life I had once known. But a new dawn was rising. One where I was in control, one where I could be my true self without compromise. And that, in itself, was the greatest freedom I could ever have. The game had ended and I had won.